Hey guys, as I mentioned in my last video about setting up voice meter in OBS, it can sometimes be beneficial to run your microphone through a program such as Adobe Audition or Reaper. What this is going to allow you to do is to apply VST plugins, so things such as EQ, compression, noise gates, and this is really going to help you in terms of shaping your sound the way you want it to be. Audio is a massive part of any video content, and applying these few little things can really help increase the production quality of your streams and recordings. You'll want to start off by downloading Reaper. I'll include a link in the description below. Now, Reaper does include a 60-day evaluation period, and while it won't actually stop you from using it once that period expires, I would highly recommend buying a license if you do intend to keep using the software. You'll also need a virtual audio cable to send the output of Reaper to. If you're using VAC in conjunction with Voicemeeter, as we talked about in my last video, you can simply add another cable into the interface. If you aren't using VAC, Voicemeeter have a donationware version that will work perfectly. Again, links in the description. Once this is done, you want to start up Reaper. Once you've started Reaper, you'll want to select the option to set your audio device driver. In order to get the lowest latency, we're going to go with WSAPI and exclusive mode polled. While it's the lowest latency, do note that this will prevent you from using your microphone with any other application while Reaper is running, but generally that's not an issue as we can just set the output from Reaper to be the input on whatever we need. You'll also want to make sure to set your input and output devices correctly. The last thing in terms of bass setup is to add a new track. This track is where we're going to be applying our effects to. While in use, you want to make sure that this button here is set to on. Now it's time to start setting up plugins. There are a few different schools of thought when it comes to plugin order, so I'm going to show you what works for me, but you can definitely feel free to experiment and see what works for you. To start adding plugins, we'll click the plugin button above the empty track here. Another quick tip, it can get rather annoying to keep repeating yourself while making changes to these settings in order to hear a result, so what you can do is record a loop of yourself in Reaper and play it back, and apply the changes to that instead. If you do use the looping method, you'll want to make sure to set up the FX on your master track. However, once you have that sorted, you can simply select them all, copy, and paste them into your main track. It may also help to include some background noise such as typing or clicking, just to help you set things like your noise gate correctly. Speaking of which, let's start off with adding a noise gate. To start adding plugins, click on the FX button above the track here. To add a noise gate, we're going to select Rear Gate from the list of available plugins, and from here we can start adjusting settings. A noise gate allows you to set a lower limit for the sounds that are picked up by your microphone. It's useful for removing background noises such as keystrokes and mouse clicks, and any other sort of noise that might be happening. The minimum amount of noise that's allowed to pass through the microphone is controlled by the threshold slider here. You'll want to set this at a level that your voice still comes through, but any background noises are muted. It may also be worth setting the high pass slider here to somewhere in the 100 to 300 Hz zone. This dictates the lowest frequencies that can activate the noise gate, and can prevent low rumbles from coming through. The rest of the settings should be fine and left as standard. However, if you are still having issues with your voice being gated, you can experiment with changing the attack and release. Attack defines the length of time it takes for the gate to go from closed to fully open, and release is the opposite. The release should be set fairly low, but not at 0 to avoid the beginning of your words being clipped. Play around with these to see what works best for you. Moving on, we're going to add EQ. Similar to adding a gate, you just want to select Re-EQ from the list of available plugins. We're not going to go too in-depth regarding EQ here, as it's a massively subjective subject, and it changes greatly depending on each individual voice. There are many other guides out there that'll cover the more granular aspects of EQing, however the included presets should be enough to give you a starting point. And finally, we're going to move on to adding compression. Compression equalizes the difference between the loudest and quietest parts of your speaking, and provides a more even listening experience to the end user. As with the other two, simply select Add, and look for Rear Comp. The main things to consider here are very similar to when setting up a gate, in that you have attack, release, and your threshold. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is the ratio. As before, attack and release dictate how long it takes for the effect to go from off to completely on, and vice versa, and ratio controls the amount of gain reduction applied to the output once it crosses the threshold. A ratio of 4 to 1 is generally a good place to start. From there, simply adjust the threshold slider downwards until you start to hear it affecting your voice. As this will reduce the output, we can make up the difference on the wet slider here. And that's pretty much it. You'll still need to play around and adjust settings to make sure that everything works for your particular voice style and room, but even with everything set to mostly defaults, you should be well on your way to better sounding vocals. As always, if this video has helped at all, please consider dropping a like and or subscribing so you don't miss any future content. It does help out a lot. Thanks.